So here we are, here with my new co-host, Lily Larson.
Hey.
So happy to be here with Julie Kedzie.
Hi.
We're so excited to have you here today.
Thank you.
We're happy to have you even in the state.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
No,
I
really,
like Iowa, so I'm
state,
glad to be
Midwest.
here.
Well, you're already Midwestern.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but Iowa in particular. Is Iowa that much different from Indiana?
I'd say Indiana is maybe a little hillier, or the parts that I lived in. But no, Iowa seems, Midwest is kind of Midwest wherever you go. I like Iowa a lot though. Indiana, I lived there my whole childhood, so you know, you always have that resentment of where you grew up, where you're just like, ah.
Right.
So yeah, it's nice to be in the Midwest, but not exactly home.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
nice.
As far as mixed martial arts go, so how did you get into that?
Well, I began in Taekwondo when I was pretty young, about 4 or 5 years old, and then I just kind of kept at it. It became where my friends were, where my family was. My sister did it as well, and when my mother moved in graduate school from Missouri to Indiana, and the whole family moved with her, we were a little displaced, my sister and I. We felt a little bit, you know, we didn't have any friends or anything, so our parents put us in a Taekwondo school called Monroe County Martial Arts, and in that school you had to cross-train in other martial arts. And so we started doing Muay Thai kickboxing and a little bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a little bit of boxing, all of the arts that they offered there, the Filipino stick fighting arts, that sort of thing. And I realized I liked all of those a little bit more than Taekwondo after a certain point. You know, I got to third degree black belt in Taekwondo, and I had to show demonstrations of other things just to show I had an open enough mind to try things. And I was like, yeah, I'm done with Taekwondo, like training it. I want to do these other things now. And then I saw the UFC back in the early days. I mean, this is the 90s that I saw it, and I watched. Gosh, it
Art
was
Jimerson.
Yeah, I didn't see that first one. I had to go back and look at that one. But it was like, I think it was Hoist Gracie Ken Shamrock 2.
Oh.
It was the one that was just so boring. It was 25 minutes of grappling, but both of them were just so, it was so boring. And I was like, this is dumb. Like, and I'd taken some grappling seminars with Eric Paulson before when he had come through town. And I thought they were fun, but I didn't make a connection. And then my friend put on a tape of all-female fights. This was the VHS days. Pretty sure it was VHS.
I remember those.
Yeah, I think it was VHS. It might have been a DVD. And I was like, blown away because it was female fighters. And there was something about it that I felt drawn and connected to. And they were doing the same stuff, or the same moves. It was the same sets of rules. But to me, I was like, oh no, I understand that. So maybe I needed the translation of seeing maybe a body type like mine doing the moves. And then it connected to me and I was like, I want to be a fighter. And yeah, that's how it kind of launched.
Wow. So what kind of like baseline do you think you need to start training, or is it best to just immerse yourself in one sport and then start looking at your possibilities?
One or multiple
Speaking
sports.
from nobody, somebody like back in time, you just watching it and be like, that looks cool, I want to do that. Of course, you want to know if they're doing it for the right reasons.
Right. Well, I guess if you were to take a person, now and say, you know, and they say, I want to be a mixed martial artist. Some 18-year-old says, I want to be a mixed martial artist. I think the best base for them is probably a foundation in wrestling and striking and jiu-jitsu, which means the foundation in almost everything. I teach myself a mixed martial arts class, but I encourage my students we're going to study the facets of mixed martial arts, but if you really want to be a fighter, you need to train boxing with boxers, you need to train kickboxing with kickboxers, wrestling with wrestlers. If you do judo, train judo with judokas, jiu-jitsu with jiu-jitsu. So you need to train all of these things specifically, but you also have to have a class to integrate them all. And that's where I think the most successful fighters is that they train these things specifically, but then they also take the time or take the extra classes to put them all together as well. So the best base, I would say the most solid base, if we're just saying what's the best thing to start from, I would say wrestling almost always. And that, especially in Iowa, it's so accessible. It's, you know, there's wrestling everywhere. And I guess it's the easiest martial art to get into because it's not considered a martial art in a lot of places. It's considered a sport. And so people don't always see it as a combat sport. Wrestling, which is interesting because it's very combative. It's about beating the other person. Yeah. So, you know, for me, I was just like, that's a very solid base. If you, like, my kid's going to be a UFC champion someday, put him in wrestling. Put him in gymnastics as well. And then I think that body awareness and that understanding of how to touch a body and manipulate it the way you want to is very strong. Which is not to say and you can stop me from talking, I talk constantly, but which is not to say that strikers who transition over are at any much of a loss. They're going to carry something to the cage that a wrestler doesn't, or they're going to carry something to the career that a wrestler doesn't. But I think wrestling, especially for an American fighter, is the best base.
Wrestling is the best base if you don't know anything. And wow.
So would you say, like, knowing how to manipulate a body, does that kind of help you be smarter in terms of, like, you know, art, spatial things, or like, you know, physics, even, like with levers and things?
Oh, absolutely. I think physics and mixed martial arts, I think that's what it comes down to, especially with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu techniques and then tossing people, you know, throwing people with certain martial arts, you know, like, yeah, when you're like, I don't know, you do a hip toss, you have to understand where your hips are in relation to them, how to get them over, or when you're
like
even
center of gravity.
Yes, center of gravity, and it's also knowing your body, and then knowing another person's body and how you interact with that body. So it's all physics. Yeah. Which I hate physics. So that's my only access to physics is understand by beating people up.
Yeah, seriously.
Is judo coming back?
Well, I mean, I think so. I think judo, I mean...
I'm a little biased.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, see, the thing about judo is it's always been there. It's just, when it comes to MMA, it's never gotten the highlight that it got till Ronda Rousey came around. And I think she brought a huge attention to this martial art and this sport, Olympic-level sport, that it's been around for so long. It's one of the most traditional martial arts, and it's great. The thing I think with judo is when it comes to competition and everything, I think there's just, it's so... I guess when it comes to levels of points and matches and everything like that, it can be so disenfranchising almost in competition.
Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive. Yeah. And wrestlers do work a lot harder.
Well, I don't know.
It's very similar sport, but wrestlers do work harder. All the old fuddy they say, oh no, judo's a much more pure sport. It's like, no. Wrestling's work. It's all work. There's no shortcuts. Yeah.
It's like everybody in high school, you know, who was in wrestling just seemed very focused, just in general.
Yeah, and it's true, but there is also a strange culture with wrestling with the weight cutting and stuff. But I guess there's that in judo too for competition, even jiu-jitsu for competition. So like weight cutting and stuff like that is the part of that sport which I think can get close to dangerous, and there's very good coaches out there who keep people in check and they don't let them cut too much, but it is a dangerous part.
Right, I've heard about the running around the track in like 2 sweatshirts. And,
it's you know, it's when you deplete your body of anything, you have to do it scientifically, and even scientifically you're still putting yourself at risk, so you have to know how to hydrate scientifically. And when it comes, because of the single-mindedness of wrestlers and the determination and the championship mindset, there's a definite culture of not admitting a weakness or admitting that you can't cut the next pound. And if your body shuts down, stuff like that, then you have to have coaches always watching you when you're cutting weight to make sure you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah. So. Find balance.
Exactly, yeah. You just need, in any sport, in any martial art, you need the right people around you if you want to be competitive.
Yeah.
So with your students, do you have them with kind of different levels, or is everybody kind of baseline as far as training towards MMA?
Oh, well, I just only recently started training at ICOR, the boxing gym, and my MMA class, it's pretty, I guess, beginner heavy when it comes to it. You know, I think everybody's just kind of starting out. There's people with we've got some really good ground fighters there who train with the university as well, and the jiu-jitsu club there, which is a great jiu-jitsu club. But when it comes to MMA, you know, I'm just trying to bring that integration of everything together. So when I see, you know, a certain move on the ground, I'm like, well, that's going to work very, very well for this situation if you're wearing a gi or if you're doing this. But if you're getting punched in the face, you have to be very careful because there's an element of there could be blood involved. There could be something involved that makes the skin more slippery. I was going to say slipperier. But I was like, oh, I study writing for a living. That's great. Making up words. But, you know, so there's different elements involved in translating, say, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighter to a mixed martial artist or a boxer to a mixed martial artist, and what things you have to do in order to, you have to keep the things that make you good, but you also have to sort of eliminate the things that will slow you down in a different art.
Don't worry, Shakespeare made up words.
Yeah, right, yeah. I'm all Shakespeare here.
Yeah.
So whether you come from a gi discipline or a no gi discipline, it can still
It'll all
still
feed
go
together
there.
because
So
your
you-
foundation is the physics, right? Like if you come from a judo background, yeah, you can't grab the gi, and there's certain things that you don't want to happen, or you've been trained not to let happen. But if you see, again, to bring up Ronda Rousey, she trained on the ground very, very hard when she had an injury where she couldn't work on the throws, and that's why her ground game is so fabulous. Fabulous is kind of a silly word. It's so elite, I guess. And, you know, there's things like that. You see these little, like, people can make within their own martial art. They can have a specialty within that translates very well to cage fighting.
That just makes me think of D&D, like having, oh, you're a rogue knife master, you can also do, like something else.
It is so funny because when you think about training for fights, it is a little bit like LARPing. And I know all fighters are going to hate me, but if you think about it, you are, like, and it didn't occur to me.
Not the nerdy ones, they're going to love you.
LARPing.
Yeah, well,
Is this an acronym that I should know?
LARPing.
Live action role playing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is not something
I'll
I'm
put
very
that
good
in.
at.
I'll put that on.
My acting skills are atrocious, so I can't. I've never done any of that. But but when you think about it, you are simulating fighting, and you're putting a storyline together of I'm going to be fighting this person. They bring this to the table and this to the table. It's just like, wow, fighters are nerds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's halfway like the space between your ears. That's what you gotta use it.
It's true. Yeah,
I mean, they say exercise makes you smarter, so.
I think so.
Yeah. Same.
Righteous. So would you call mixed martial arts, even though martial arts is in the title, would it be more of a martial art or combat sport?
That's a very good question. I would think that there's arguments on both counts.
Okay.
I mean, any martial art is a combat sport if you're using it in competition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're using combative sports.
Like sports,
combatively.
Points,
But as a martial art, I do believe MMA is its own martial art. I think that what's interesting about it is that you can win by, you see this really elite, amazing fighter win by just a crazy person coming in there and throwing an overhand. And that's, like this person, this guy has so little experience and so little training, and this person's been training for decades and they're very refined, and then, person A with the little training still wins the fight. And I think that comes down to the part of MMA people don't necessarily address, which is the chaotic part of fighting. The part where you have to also understand that there's a strict set of rules that you need to follow in order to win by the points, but there's also rules
like
in
loopholes, kind of.
Well, yeah, or the loop, like you can't grab the hair, you can't stick your finger in their eye, you can't kick them in the groin. Like those are the rules to make things safe. But within even that structure of a rule set, there is elements of chaos that have to be prepared for. And I think that MMA as a martial art is the one that deals with that the best, because you have to know how to kick, punch, wrestle, grapple, throw an elbow, kickbox. You know what I mean? You have to know that, or you have to be familiar that that's going to happen. And so in that regard, I definitely think it's a martial art. I think it's a different martial art, but I think it's probably the most vital martial art. And I'm biased because I teach it.
Right? Yeah. Well, I mean, after reading your article, and then just like Greg Jackson, he really has the philosophy about it, but he doesn't even have to be a fighter to make people great, and that's really amazing. Of course. And I've taught some people before, and they weren't quite ready to face another person, and that doesn't mean they can't do it.
Right.
But yeah, there's something about the competition that makes it a little bit more real.
Yeah,
like
it raises the
that you're
stakes.
not that it keeps your instructors honest, I think, kind of. That I wouldn't feel good if I taught somebody some flying furball kick that's gonna have them fall on their face.
Right.
Too. Yeah.
Right. Makes sense. And in that framework of what you're describing there of being accountable as a coach, I would never want any of my students to fight without me saying you're ready to fight. And I think that's what good coaches do. And that's definitely Greg would never corner anybody he didn't think was ready to fight. Because you have to know, like, if somebody's going to fight, then like a LARP. Or is it you have to game plan for that? You have to prepare specifically for that.
You
or
really do.
It's a stupid thing to do to walk into a cage and think you're going to spontaneously just win. Like you do have to be prepared.
Yeah,
So.
definitely. Even if it's not for like broken bones for the ego.
Spontaneously winning would be awesome sometimes, though.
Right, but it's embarrassing too.
Yeah, no, that's true. You want to win that way. Well, right on. Well, that's enough about fighting. Okay. Let's talk about the writing.
Yeah, so I found out you were an English lit major, and I was like, okay, what are some of your favorite works?
Oh, gosh. Hemingway, The Sun Also Rises is one of those books that just got me just right in the feels. Like that one, for some reason, I think that was the book that marked me understanding metaphor and understanding simple structure of sentence and how beautiful it could be. So that one, that's my go-to. I think about that book all the time. Like, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I don't know much Hemingway, but I'm like, I know he's a classic. So.
It's like he's just
little
a
old man in the
bastard.
sea. He is, right?
Yeah, just one of those people who are just like, I would slap you in the face, but please keep writing. I mean, he's dead, but yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any other works particularly?
From Hemingway or?
Or
just
no,
in general?
just in general.
Gosh.
Or things that you might consider an influence?
Oh, it's always an influence when the right teacher shows it to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Like James Baldwin, when I first read James Baldwin, I didn't quite get it. Like I understood the message, but I didn't understand how absolutely beautiful his writing is and how he puts essays together. And I keep returning to James Baldwin almost as this like rediscovering over and over. It's just like, whoa, this person, like what he contributed to the sentence and to 20th century, like the canon of 20th century literature. And then there's also like, and I'm talking about like dudes, right? I'm not talking about female writers. And there are so many good female authors out there. Like when I think about how, well, we were talking about how I have pretty bad attention deficit disorder. And I think about that and I think somebody like Virginia Woolf, I can track her, like the movement she can do very well. And I don't know if there's any kind of like connection there or anything like that, but I'm just like, when I write a little bit too swirly, you know, and it takes me forever to get to the point. And when she got to the point and was swirly, if that makes any sense. Like she described things.
So like a challenging blend, do you kind of like look up to her style or?
I do. And I think that I look at it, I'm just like, I'll never be that good. Like a lot of writers were just their craft and just the way they constructed things is so good that I'm just like, I hate you. You know?
Yeah.
I was like, you're so amazing, but I hate you.
Yeah. I've had a teacher say, oh, you should read this person. It kind of has your voice. And you read that person, it's like, oh, that's so much better.
Yeah, you're like, that was flattering of you to say that. I wish I did have that.
I thought I was you.
Yeah. Like I don't know, I've been under a rock. Well, I've been in a gym for decades, but I've just discovered John Jeremiah Sullivan, and I am just, everything that he writes, I'm just like, even when he's talking about reality TV, I'm just like, how did you do that? How did you make me want to crawl inside of your words and like take a bath? I don't understand. Cool,
so that's a good catchphrase. Can I steal that? Crawl inside your words and take a bath. Or shower if you don't have enough time,
I feel like
3 every day shower.
Yeah, I feel so sexist too because like it's male authors that are coming off the top of my head. But you know, there's so many vital works too, like current writers like who are really like there's a new canon kind of a work, people like Roxane Gay who are bringing feminist issues and race issues like straight up in your face and saying, why are you so stupid that you can't see this? Like what this has happened to so many people for so long. They're living in the same country as you and they're living the same like why haven't you seen this? And it's like, oh shit, why haven't I? Sorry. You know, it's like you know, it's that thing, and it for me it speaks to how, in my sense, that I lived a life of, even though I've never had money, I've had a privileged life that I didn't even know was a privileged life.
Right, like Americans have the most cars in the world or something.
Right, well, there's just, if you can imagine it here, it can happen for you, especially if you're white and male. Yeah. And I'm not saying that to start some kind of, it just occurs to me, I'm also white and female. Like, it just occurs to me, it's just like, wow, I've just not been aware of things. And now when I hear a voice, like Roxane Gay's or somebody like that who makes me aware of it and makes me think, I want to know more. I want to know. I want to see how I can make things better. You know, and sometimes it's just listening to other voices, and it's hearing hard things about yourself and the way you know. And it's really okay, you know what? I'm going to shut up and listen, and then I'm going to try and learn. And if it makes me a better person and a better writer, I'm all in. Yeah. So.
That aspect probably translates over to fighting. Like you probably have a lot of hard lessons you learn about yourself.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You go into the gym and you fail every day. And if you're not failing in the gym, then your successes aren't good.
Or
you
like
know?
the rough seas make the best sailors kind of a thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, it's true. You don't. Growth is so hard because it's messy and it's uncomfortable. But that's how you get better as a fighter. And I do believe there's something to be said for the undefeated fighter and how brilliant that is and how wonderful that is. But I do believe that failure is the most important lesson in fighting.
Yeah.
And I mean, I say that with somebody who had a lot of losses on her record. I'm revamping now. Well, yeah, the losses were the best part. No, but you don't understand what's at stake until you lose, or until you fail at least, even if it's just in the gym.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, sometimes failures are like the best memories, honestly. Yeah. You're like, I don't know about that. No, just kidding.
No, that's right. I mean, I've only had a couple fights, but I've had some matches, and I've actually won. And I was like, oh, that guy totally deserved it better.
Right.
Yeah, but we were just glad that we experienced that together,
Yeah.
you know?
And it is a bonding moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you go toe-to-toe with somebody and you know they're putting as much effort as you are, then there's an intimacy between two people in the fight that's very hard to match in other places in life. And I'm not trying to say that in a sexualized way or in a romantic way, just an intimacy between two human beings pushing at their very best. It's against one another, but it also is together. Yeah. And I think that's the thing that gets lost on a lot of people, how important that is.
Yeah.
I think it's really awesome that you, at least from what I read, you wrote about fighting. How do you feel like fighting is written? Like, do you think it's accurate, or do you think, I mean, I granted, like, sometimes we just want to see the action movie. We want to see Jackie Chan kick 15 people because, but, like, some of my favorite, I've had some really favorite writers, right? And I like the whole story, and then they have a fight, and I'm like, that wouldn't happen.
So they write about
like,
fighting.
and then they guy kicks him and his leg breaks, and I was like, you know, I don't see the struggle of the training, but I think maybe when you're writing towards a popular audience, maybe the whole concept of writing or describing a fight needs to be more aesthetic, rather than the minimal, like, pummeling for underhooks. Nobody wants to hear a story, but I was trying to get out of, but he had that tight wizard, and like, maybe we might think it's interesting, but everybody's like, dude.
Right, but they want to know, they don't understand what those things are, or how much 2 inches in a fight can change everything, right? Moving your elbow just
like
2 inches.
some authors fail to say the part like, and this changed everything. They're just like, 2 inches, whatever. Yeah.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, and I think a lot of that also comes because we're a very visual culture, so we want our books, how do I say, because I sound very snotty, and
snot away, snot away.
So I do.
We got tissues everywhere.
Yeah. Well, it's the I guess aesthetics a nice way of putting it, but we want the big explosions and the big movies and the things like that. Those we want excitement, we want stimulation constantly, and sometimes the grappling moments and stuff like that are not that exciting because we don't have enough build-up. And some authors, including me, I've failed to do this, write the build-up, get into there and get it so it comes to this, there's a crescendoing moment. And I think movies and visual arts have a lot to do with that too, and we see, some really brilliant, I think, martial arts movies are out there, and some that where you're just like, well, that's totally unrealistic, and that's unrealistic. But somehow, like, this got away, this one was okay. Yeah, I don't know, I'm not giving enough nouns here. But say the movie Warrior. I actually thought that was a beautiful movie.
It was good. I thought they could have had a little less drama, and it could have still been a great movie.
They had a lot of different plots going on in
that
movie.
Right? I thought it could have been.
And I thought it was brilliantly, Nick Nolte was brilliant.
Right.
I thought he just phenomenal.
And they looked like they really trained.
Oh, they did really train. Jill Edgerton trained at our gym
so
for that.
Cool
Like, but is the guy on there that listens to Beethoven, is that kind of like Greg Jackson?
No, Frank Grillo came to our gym and he shadowed Greg.
He shadowed? I was like, that's got to be Greg Jackson. Because in the movie, he says, like,
I've never seen the movie.
envision Beethoven while you're getting the crap beat out of you, or something like. It's a little bit over the top, but I'm sure.
I think, Frank is. Have you ever seen The Grey with Liam Neeson?
Okay,
it's about where he kills all the wolves. Yeah, so everybody hates it, but it's actually an amazing movie. It's Hemingway-esque. And Frank in that movie was so good. He's such a good actor that he's not going to just be Greg in Warrior, if that makes any sense. He's also going to incorporate the elements of what Greg said or what he learned with him to things that he finds inspiring and stuff. So he was based a lot on Greg. I think there were elements that also Frank brought to the table that he thought were more elevated. Because Greg's never said, listen to Beethoven during a fight. He's been like, he's...
That's just
Greg,
what he got from his personality.
I think so, and I think that was the connection that he made with him, where he saw that it was good, because Beethoven's Ninth is Greg's favorite piece of music.
Cool.
So that makes, I know the guy, like I worked for him for so long. It's just like, oh, okay. But but Frank Grillo is such a brilliant actor that I think that he took some elements of that, incorporated into something else that inspired him, and then brought that to the role. If that makes sense.
Oh, that's cool. I don't remember if it was before this or on screen. You were like, oh, I'm not that good at acting. Well, honestly, you kind of have some of the pieces, parts. It's like, one of my majors is theater, so it's like, the build-up you were talking about that's in writing, you actually have to get that too. Like, it's an emotional build-up. It's like, what thoughts are the character having? So
right. Yeah, and I think that there's such a similar thing to that. But what you can do that in acting with your body and with your intonation, everything like that, I don't have that control over. Like, if I'm not putting hands on somebody, I'm very clumsy. I don't inhabit my body very well unless I'm actually doing martial arts. And so, ideally, I would be... It
comes down to the teacher, like you said, for martial arts too.
Yeah,
it really does.
It's true. You have the right coach. They can impart like a skill set on you pretty well. Yeah.
Well, there's one section from, can I read it?
Sure.
I don't know if I have the best voice quality.
I haven't read that essay in a very long time.
But, so when you're in Australia, before your last fight with Betchkerer, and Peter kept bringing up the beauty of the intersections of physicality and art, how he admires mixed martial arts because it's art in action. What you make with your fights, it is a beautiful art. A human form engaged in purposeful action. Such high art. He dabbled in his Australian accent. Greg added that art doesn't just stop there. How is it all connected to math if you disseminate it into its basic levels? Combat can be linked to all things: chaos theory, game theory, evolutionary biology. And then let's get to the part. And then I thought, but damn, it's really hard to try to be so esoteric when somebody's trying to elbow your face in.
Yeah, it is.
What a great way to phrase that.
Totally, completely forgot I wrote that too. I'm like, oh, No, it's funny. It actually, I just remembering Peter in the museum and the way he and Greg connected on that level, and I was like, even though I was the one there for a fight, I was like almost a tourist listening to them talk about these things.
Well, cutting weight has got to be surreal, even as it is.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's funny. It's a good horrible, but it's still horrible. Like because you get to fight, so all of that when you're cutting weight and everything, it's such a process of ceremony.
Yeah.
Because you're used to it, and this is what my body's doing, and it's not good for your body.
Right, it's the crap mixed with the excitement of the upcoming event.
Yeah, it's a ceremony almost, and it's a ritual. But beyond that, just when I hear these conversations, like I heard those conversations that they were having, and I was already in my head battling with the idea that I'm probably going to quit. I can't quit. I'm not a quitter. What do I do? What goes on? And then I'm just hearing this, and I'm like, God, that sounds so beautiful and poetic, and it's like Beethoven, like going on, like these words, right? This conversation, and I'm just like, yeah, but also you're getting hit in the face. Also, you do get grounded by the fact that it's actual physical contact.
And you're not very artistic when you're dehydrated either.
It's hard. It's hard to be artistic when you're dehydrated. Yeah.
Well, right. So this was the essay, which will be in the links below. You should read it. You should read it. It's just an excellent story because you're just going through so many phases that we don't even see, before you even come out and do anything. So this was the essay that got you and I, but I heard that you were also selected by Columbia, too.
Yeah, I applied to Columbia and I applied to Iowa. And actually, Columbia, when they called, I started crying because I had this idea in my head that I would be this professor in New York and I'd be living this whole life. And then when Iowa called, I was walking my dog in this field in Kansas, and there was this windstorm going on, and it was just beautiful, like one of these poetic moments, and I'm listening and I'm like, oh, I really want to cry. And I was like, oh, I should really think this through. Okay, Iowa has, and it sounds like I knock on Columbia, and I don't
New York is
They're
cool.
Brilliant university. Brilliant writers have come from there. But I cannot afford $95,000 a year. And Iowa has such good writers, and I can bring my dog with me, and I can be. It's hard to explain, but it's just like I'm within driving distance of family, and I'm also the culture in Iowa. Like the Iowa City is such a great town. It is such a cool town, and the culture here of people. And then the wrestling culture, which I feel connected to, even though I'm not a wrestler. It's the MMA aspect. It's connected somehow. I don't understand. It's like Iowa, I knew kind of was the right choice. Finances help too. It's a fully funded program, so I'm teaching, and I'm able to,
Nice.
I'm able to survive. Whereas in Columbia, I think I would be.
Yeah.
I would have a really hard time.
Be some
I
couch
can't even.
crashing a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
They charge you for air in New York.
It's hard, and it's a really vital culture, and I want the culture
It is
of New York.
cool,
I
though,
want to
yeah.
be in that city someday. I want to experience all of that, but at this time in my life, I'm not young. I'm not without massive debt from being a human being in America right now, and I have pets, and I don't know. I want to be at that point where I'm in that city and I'm doing those things, but I also know the best way to be in touch with who I am as a writer is that quiet time, and I think that Iowa provides that quiet time for growth. Yeah. So.
Nice.
That's a great way to put it.
Also, really, really good professors. The teachers here are amazing. So.
Yeah, we've got our world-renowned writing program. They bring in so many people too. Yeah.
It's just phenomenal instructors. Yeah, so it's really good.
Righteous.
Yeah.
Well, that was awesome having you here, Julie. Did you have any plugs or anything that you wanted to say?
Guys,
you don't have to.
No, it's okay. You guys should come to check out my class at iCore MMA.
Yeah.
I teach 4 days a week. We've just changed the schedule, so I was teaching Monday through Thursday. Now I'll be teaching Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So the Saturday, Sunday, if you're looking for something to do during the day, come on by, take my class.
Yeah.